Now we'd like to call Dr. Syaza Shukri from Malaysia, a political scientist, democratization researcher in IIUM. Please, Ms. Shukri.
Thank you, Madam MC. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can we go to my first slide? I would just like to introduce myself first. Firstly, thank you to LIRA for inviting me to give a presentation on this topic today. Sorry, Empowering the Future Youth Optimism in Southeast Asia. As I promised, I want to introduce myself first. I'm currently an Associate Professor of Political Science and the head of the Department of Political Science at International Islamic University. But also, I am a visiting senior fellow at the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. Why do I mention this? Is because this research that I did is with my team in Singapore. We did a cross-country study on the youth in Southeast Asia. Now, the next question you may ask is, why am I talking about Southeast Asia in a symposium on South Asia, right? Firstly, Dr. Sapana said it's okay. But secondly, we're living in an interconnected world today, right? So whatever views or actions of youth in one part of the world can easily manifest in other parts of the world, meaning that they get encouraged, motivated by their peers in different parts of the world. So don't assume that when something is happening in Southeast Asia, someone in South Asia is not reading about it, not watching it. We saw this happen more than a decade ago with the Arab Spring, how it spread very quickly across the region. And even in Southeast Asia, what we saw and why we were interested in doing this study is that in 2020 to 2021, around that time, we saw a lot of youth protests going on. So it intrigues us. Why is it a regional thing? And I think if we study the whole world, we see that everywhere we're seeing more or less the same thing, right? This dissatisfaction by the youth, dissatisfaction with the political system, with the economy, etc. So now we can go to my next slide. So as I was saying, this was a study that was conducted by my team and myself in Singapore. We surveyed 3,000 youth across campuses in 6 Southeast Asian countries. Again, like I said, because we realized that youth have been really engaged in Southeast Asia. They're participating in protests. Especially we're talking about protests, actually. But also my team and I look at online activities as well. But I'm not going to share that here. So yeah, however, comparative studies across the region remain one thing. So that's what we did. Next, please. Next is just, okay. So this is what I promised, just to show you that this has been going on since at least 2020. I mean, this is the period that we were interested in. On the top left there are protests in Thailand. In 2020, 2021, the youth were really going out asking for democratic reforms on the monarchic system, basically more democracy in Thailand. And then if we go to the bottom left, that was in Myanmar. I believe it was 2021. At the peak of COVID-19, we had the coup, definitely, and students were again at the front. So we are encouraged. Students are the ones that are leading this kind of demands for change, or at least stability in their own country. I go to the bottom right, that's in my own country, Malaysia. That was 2021, I think, also during COVID. We had a few protests going on in 2021 that led to the change of prime minister from our 8 to 9 prime ministers. So what I'm trying to say is that it works, right? When the youth go out and make these demands, it works. But of course, it depends on larger structural and political dynamics of a country. The bottom right is in Indonesia. This is very recent. Indonesia has been seeing this kind of youth-led protests for the past 5 years, I would say, since 2020, when they had the omnibus law. So again, the idea here, I know we have a lot of students here, and I'm not trying to push you out on the streets and going for protests, but I'm just saying that you have your voice, and your voice matter, and maybe use it. Next, please. Methodology, I don't think we need to go too deeply into it. It's just that we surveyed 3,000 students. They are mostly undergraduate students, 18 to 24, across campuses, because we're interested in students' activities. Okay, next. So this is the main crux that I want to discuss, that what we saw was the youth in Southeast Asia, they're optimistic for the future, especially for the future. Next, please. So here are the key takeaways. If anything else, you can take this with you. Stability of the economy, we saw, is the most important when it comes to youth's perception of the political system and also just of their country itself. The economy is very important. I'll show you the graphs later, what I meant by this. In contrast, countries dealing with political or economic volatility observe higher levels of youth skepticism. Especially we saw this among Indonesian youth and also Thai youth. As I was saying, they went through a few protests over the past 3-4 years. However, despite Indonesia and Thailand both observing more or less the same volatility, we saw that in Thailand, the youth are a bit more slightly optimistic than Indonesians, probably because we didn't do a qualitative study like Dr. Daisy, so it's just a survey of 3,000 students, but we hypothesized that it's because, based on our expertise of the region, that we saw continuity in Thailand's economic, especially its policy. So the youth are satisfied with that. Next, please. Okay, there's no microphone, but never mind. I think you guys can see it. As I was saying, if you look at Singapore and Vietnam, the percentage of the youth who are satisfied with the current political situation are quite high. Okay. And now your question is, what's going on here? Why are youth in Singapore and Vietnam basically happy with their political system? Again, we hypothesize that they've gone through development, especially in Vietnam, economic development, which is good for the country. And Singapore, we know, is a developed country, so no problem at all. Another point I want to make is that Vietnam, as we know, is a one-party state. Singapore is a hybrid regime. So the point is that it doesn't matter on what kind of political system they have. What's important is that there's stability and opportunity for the youth. And you see, as I was saying, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, they have more respondents who are dissatisfied with the current political situation. Next, please. This is about law enforcement. Again, more or less the same thing, which is that Singaporeans and Vietnamese are satisfied with the current state of law enforcement in the country. Why is this important? Now, that's the question that you should ask, right? When people trust, people meaning the youth or none, generally when they trust rule of law in the country is going on well, they are more likely to be satisfied and to abide by the law, and this is what we need for stability and cohesion, right? When the youth start to question the current state of law enforcement in the country, it could lead to worse things. Next. Political system, same thing. Singapore and Vietnamese are the most satisfied compared to the others. Okay, let's go next. Interestingly, when we look at their perception of the economic future, almost all of the respondents are positive, meaning they're optimistic about the future. So this is a good thing. Regardless of what's going on right now, we want the youth to be optimistic with the future, because that is their future. So they need to feel they have buy-in in that. Otherwise, again, it would lead to bad things that we don't want to think of right now. Next. Sure, same thing. How confident of you with the government's planning? All are more or less confident. Next. Okay, can you go to the next slide? So we also asked about what are the issues that are most concerning to them in terms of priorities. If you see the graph, sure, they are concerned with almost everything. I'm not sure if you can see there, but some of the things are like deteriorating human rights, domestic political instability, increased military tension, etc., etc. So the youth are concerned with almost all of these things. But what are the top three? The top three are unemployment and recession, corruption, and widening socioeconomic gaps and income disparity. If I may use a term by Bill Clinton's team during the campaign in 1992, is the economy stupid? Sorry for that word, but that's the term that we use. The youth are concerned about the economy, right? So for policymakers, for the government, this is what you should focus on because they're thinking of their future. Okay, next, please. So this is about satisfaction with democracy. If you look at the top left box there, democracy is the best system of governance available. More than half of the respondents, as 51%, agree that democracy is the best. It's up to you to look at that positively or negatively. We can say, sure, more than a majority say that they prefer democracy. But if you think about it, that's a very small majority, only 51%. Almost a quarter responded that under circumstances, a non-democratic government is acceptable, meaning democracy is not the end game for most of this, well, not most, for a quarter of these respondents. So please keep that in mind. The third, there is no difference between democracy and other systems of governance. Close to 15% chose this as an option. Before we move on, I just want to say on the top row, Malaysia has the highest, so as a Malaysian, representing Malaysian, I'm proud of that. 65% of Malaysians prefer democracy. But overall in Southeast Asia, it's a mixed picture. Next. Okay, so the conclusion. After showing all of these graphs, what do you get from this? Number one, a balance between democratic values and practical governance may emerge, reshaping political ideologies. So this is what I've been saying just now. It's not so much about democracy per se. It's not so much about the political system. What is most important is that the governments that we have of the day can produce output that the youth can accept. It's the governance, good governance. That is what policymakers should focus on, not on the kind of system that they have. Second, law enforcement and justice system reform. Continued dissatisfaction with law enforcement may affect social cohesion. So like I said, we need to get the youth to trust the system, to trust that the authorities that are responsible on them are taking care of them. If the youth start to question and believe that the authorities are corrupt, then it could lead, as it says here, affect social cohesion. And finally, we need policies that prioritize the youth. But that's not my last slide. I have one more, if you may. So how do I relate this with Southeast Asia? Well, we had Mr. Javed yesterday with us as the guest speaker, right? And he shared with all of us that were here yesterday morning, one of the challenges in South Asia is demographic challenges, right? In the sense that your population is growing and you're going to have more young people entering the workforce, more than that, just entering the system. So policymakers need to keep these young people in mind, right? We need, what do I mean by keeping them in mind? We need to empower the youth, empower the students here. We need policies, youth inclusive policies, so that, okay, Mr. Javed mentioned that the demographic is a challenge to you guys in South Asia. I would challenge that and say that's an opportunity, actually. You have a youthful population. Use that. You have this youthful energy. Get the youth involved in policy making and every aspect of socio-political and even the economy. This is how you invigorate the nation.